Hello, my name is Esau McCauley. I'm the host of the Esau McCauley podcast. Today, we're joined by our producer, Mike.
Hey, Esau.
And we're blessed enough to have not one guest, which is our norm, but two guests. First, we have Sharon I always say your name wrong.
It's McMahon.
First, we have Sharon I know it's McMahon, but my brain wants to say something else. First, we have Sharon McMahon, the author of the New York Times bestselling The Small and the Mighty, and the editor-in-chief of The Preamble. Is that correct?
That's right. Thanks for having me.
And we have Justin Giboney, the president of the AND campaign and the author of the forthcoming book, Don't Let Nobody Turn You Around, for which I was blessed to be able to write the foreword. Now, for those of you who are listening to the podcast, you probably will ask, why is Esau dressed like this? It is not because I've decided I wanted to be the next Walter Cronkite.
But you do look good.
Thank you. But it's because I just got out of class and I rode my bike here and I actually teach in a shirt and tie like a Neanderthal. And so you have to deal with a slightly more dressed up version of me. Is that okay? Is that okay?
Yeah.
It's okay?
Yeah,
I know
it's
you
okay.
don't have a tie, so I feel like it's okay.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, you made me look bad, but it's fine.
I should have sent you a message.
Yeah, we could have been tie buddies.
Today on the podcast, we will probably spend most of our time talking a little bit about a relatively heavy topic that's kind of rumbling through our republic. Yeah. And that is the assassination of Charlie Kirk yesterday while he was engaging in a debate in a college in Utah. And that incident and the aftermath of his death has just spurred a lot that's going on in the country. And I want to bring in two respected political analysts to give us some context. So first, I'm going to ask if it's okay, Sharon, America's government teacher, can you put like the current political violence in context? I know it might be hard to say in like a minute or two. Can you give us a history of political violence in the United States?
Well, I mean, I think it's important to point out that political violence in the United States is not new. And as much as we all want to say, like, this is not an America that I want to live in, and I share that sentiment, violence has always existed in the United States. People used to, the foundations of the republic are rooted in violence, of course. But for hundreds of years, people were extrajudicially lynched, and people would take their children to these types of events as a afternoon picnic, and they would take pictures of themselves with the deceased. And that type of violence was not just glorified amongst some people. It was commonplace. So we have that as an example of sort of an extrajudicial and in some cases politically motivated violence. And there are many examples throughout the 1920s in particular, which was a very fraught period in American history. A lot of violence against Native Americans, thinking about like the Osage tribes in Oklahoma, for example. A lot of violence related to the origin of organized crime during the Prohibition era. But the most recent examples of political unrest are in the late 1960s, when we saw the assassination of multiple very prominent political leaders, including Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy Sr., and even the violence surrounding the 1968 Democratic National Convention. And that is, perhaps the time period that most people are looking at most closely, these very public events that were heavily covered by mass media.
So it's really interesting because when I think about political violence in my context, is my imagination, I think of the assassination of Lincoln, and then I kind of skip forward as far as like directly political assassinations to the like 1950s and the 1960s. Were there other politicians, and I know that Charlie Kirk was not an elected official, but he was like a public politician. Were there like prominent politicians who were assassinated in like the 1920s or like post-Lincoln, pre-civil rights? Is there some people who have kind of missed out? And if there's someone you can toss in too, Justin, there's someone who comes to mind.
Well, James Garfield is an example of somebody he was the president, and he was assassinated because the person who killed him believed that he owed him something because of the spoils system, in which it was very prevalent for people to just give jobs to their friends. He felt like I had donated to James Garfield's campaign. I've done these things. He owes me a job. And then when he was rebuffed for a job, he decided he would meet James Garfield at a train station and shoot him. Ultimately, James Garfield hung on for a very long time and didn't actually die from gunshot wounds, but died from the ensuing infection from his medical treatment. President McKinley is another example of politically motivated violence in which somebody went up to him at a public event in New York, in upstate New York, walked up to him, waited in line, not unlike what was happening with Charlie Kirk, where people wait in line at a microphone to speak to him, walked up to President McKinley and shot him point blank. Teddy Roosevelt was shot, didn't die, but there are many examples of prominent leaders in history. Of course, JFK is another very prominent example. There are many examples of people who both lived and died, but these are not necessarily new ideas. But I do think this is different. This is different than the past.
Were you about to hit on Justin?
Yeah, I was going to say there's some probably less prominent names during Reconstruction. There are a lot of African-American leaders who were caught up in some of these riots that were happening in the South during that time. And so that's something to look at as well.
I think it is really interesting because it relates to the narrative that we like to tell about ourselves. And there's this pristine past that we sometimes say, this is not who we are. And one of the things that I think that might be instructive about this present moment is that it seems that oftentimes in a tragedy, rather than focusing in on what might be revelatory about the present moment, we hearken back to a past that never existed. So obviously, the one that people remember most prominently as relates to political violence was the 1950s and the 1960s. So would you say that this is similar or different to what was happening then? What do you think, Justin? You think we're in a similar moment, or there's something distinctively unique about this?
Well, I think it's unique, but it's probably too similar, right? I mean, there's this type of polarization that has built up to where we don't see a way out outside of this kind of delusion that's always there that says maybe I can get rid of all my enemies, all my political opponents. And so you see that really just build up. I think in the past, it may have been more so, based on race and taking out their leaders. But it always seems like a sense of not being in control and things changing and not being willing to deal with that change.
So do you see Charlie Kirk's murder as a part of like this wider present moment? I know there's been like a lot of conversation that this is just like political violence is happening just on the left against the right, or do you see there's more of I don't know if you call it balance, but how do you see the current political violent moment? Like, is that a good question for you, Sharon?
Look at the numbers,
or Justin?
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Go ahead, Justin.
I think if you look at the numbers, more people think political violence is acceptable on both sides right now. And so you do see that there. In this particular instance, I don't know that a lot of people who aren't in very conservative circles know how influential Charlie Kirk was. What Charlie Kirk ends up doing is he goes into academia, which was captured by progressivism for decades. And he starts basically switching a lot of these kids. He's had by doing exactly what he was doing when he got shot, going in onto these campuses, having open conversations. He has a big part to do in the vibe shift that you see in America in general. So this is a major moment. And I think this particular one, and we don't know who shot him and what it's about, but I do think there was a lot of anxiety from progressives, not one that Trump gets back in, but Kirk had something to do with him getting back in and a lot of the support that he's getting from college students and even younger. So we need to note that in this moment because it is important. He was very influential.
Right. A couple stats. I mean, Kirk was given credit for the shift. Historically, college students had voted progressive for the last few elections, and they leaned right pretty dramatically this last election. And then according to a study, the COVID States Project study in 22, about 25% of Americans say it's okay to use violence against the government. And they found that was true for people on both sides of the aisle. Yeah. But Sharon, you said, as you wrapped up what you said earlier, that this feels different. And Justin was kind of getting that. I think we all feel like this is different. Why specifically do you think this thing is different than previous incidents of political violence in the 60s and elsewhere.
Yeah, I think Justin raises a really important point that if you are not on the political right, you may not be aware of the absolute stranglehold that Charlie Kirk had on, especially on some segments of conservative thought. So his prominence in that field, like during the 2024 election cycle, his videos in which he spent a considerable amount of time, as Justin mentioned, going around to college campuses and just sort of debating anybody who showed up, who wanted to step up to the microphone, his videos racked up billions of views. And he, along with figures like Joe Rogan, are very widely credited with this swing, not so much among college-age women, but this swing among college-age men towards the right. And it's not a perfect, like, oh, they're all right-leaning now, but there's definitely been a shift in the political thought of this age demographic that he was specifically targeting. So that is part of it. His incredible prominence and his ability to go viral. And this has not been present before. When Dr. King was alive and was a widely hated figure during his lifetime, there might be TV clips of him. There were newspaper articles written by him and about him. But he didn't have the ability to go viral on a handheld device that every single one of us keeps in our purse or pocket, keeps near us 24 hours a day. So the ability for the information to disseminate, I think, is a very key part of this. But the other thing that feels really different is that so many people have millions of people have sometimes unwittingly watched close-up video footage of Charlie Kirk being assassinated. And that has impacted their perception of this event. It appears to me, I'm not painting myself as an expert, but it appears to me that he this is almost like a sniper type attack from a rooftop with a high-powered rifle. The person appears to have fired one shot and it hit him right through the neck. And I do not recommend watching the video. Watching any murder on video is horrible, but this is uniquely bad. It is uniquely grotesque. Yeah. So that video footage, I know, for example, my own college-age children inadvertently watched it. They just are on social media. Yeah. People shared a clip. They're like, what? They click on it and they were confronted with something that they didn't even wish to see. And that impacts us even if we don't want it to. It does.
Do you think that's the reason that, this list is floating around on a bunch of different places? I think I saw it first with Ezra Klein. He mentioned like this in the context of a wider world of political violence, where there was the attempted kidnapping of the mayor, the governor of Michigan. Is Gretchen?
In 2020, Gretchen Whitmer.
And then they had the obviously the
insurrection in 21,
and then the pipe bombs of the DNC and the RNC. The murders of the Democratic state representative
from Minnesota,
Minnesota, and her husband. Yep. And then the shooting of another representative from that same state. Yep. Co-located with the 2 assassination attempts on Trump, and the murder by of the what's that guy's name? Luigi.
Oh yeah, the CEO.
And then, so this is in the context of a lot of political violence. And any reasonable articulation of that list of people includes both Democrats and Republicans. But do you think it's the idea that people can see this and they just read about what happened to, because I think the idea of someone coming into your home posing as a police officer and murdering you is visceral, but it does feel like there is a different kind of response. Is it because of the prominence of Charlie Kirk? Is it because of the video? Or is there a particular reason why this particular act of political violence feels even more impactful than the ones that have come before. And that's to leave out Nancy Pelosi in the hammer attack at her home.
And in 25, Molotov cocktails were thrown into the home of Governor Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania as well.
So is it because it's the death? What do you think? What makes this feel so different, Justin?
I would say because what they tried to do was successful. He ended his life. In those other instances, either there was a conspiracy and things, unless I'm missing one of them.
So no, the ones in Minnesota, the people died.
Oh, the ones in
their homes.
Yeah, I think that's a prominence. So part of it is prominence. I forgot about that one. And then I think it was successful, but everybody saw it, and he was a big name. That's a big difference. I mean, you're talking about a leader of a major movement and people who folks wouldn't have known had not, the newspaper. I mean, the media brought it up.
I'm from Minnesota, so the assassination of Melissa Hortman and the attempted assassination of Mark Hoffman and his wife are, of course, they're big news here. But I don't think there's any case to be made that the Hortmans and the Hoffmans were anywhere near as well known as Charlie Kirk is. And that's not to diminish in any way what happened to them. This is not to say, oh, he's famous, that's why we should care about him and not them. I do care about them. It was also noteworthy that the person who is charged with their murder had a list of over 70 prominent people that would potentially be a target. And I do think the internet plays a role in his ability to carry out those crimes. He was able to figure out where those people lived. He was able to buy himself an outfit that looked like he was a police officer. He was able to get some, lights for the top of his car, so it looked like an unmarked police car when he rolled up into the yard. So the internet assisted him in his ability to commit that crime. But I do think the prominence of Charlie Kirk is absolutely a huge aspect of this.
So I'm interested in just hearing from you on it. I think this has been so helpful to put this in context that there's a pattern of this, and yet this does seem uniquely different than anything we've felt before. It seems like while most of the major leaders and politicians are saying the right things, we need to tone it down. It also seems like I'm in my algorithms, I'm looking at the average people, and the tone is not getting ratcheted down. No. And so part of me is, I think what a lot of us who are listening are just struggling. It feels like there's no way out of this.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. I was the first thing. I mean, I was one of the things that happens when a crisis occurs is we tend to center our own feelings and not center the feelings of the people who are impacted. So from my perspective, the idea of anybody, I don't care what your politics are, the idea that anybody loses their parents. I have small children, but I automatically knew. So there was a sense of like sadness because I knew that this violence was going to beget more violence. So first I was lamenting the fact that anybody dies. And I thought about someone losing like their father or their spouse. But then I was honestly afraid for the country because I know how prominent Charlie is. And I knew that was going to lead to like outrage. And I will be honest, right after this happened, I got home eventually I got home and it was late. I needed to walk my dog around the block. And it was dark and I was by myself. And it was the first time I felt a little bit nervous. And I was walking around my neighborhood and a car pulled up like beside me at night and they kind of pulled to where I was. And that terrified me. Ended up being a friend from my neighborhood who hadn't heard about or didn't actually think about it. And I said, hold on, like you can't just pull up to a black guy right after all of this stuff has occurred. And I do feel like my main emotional experience, apart from lamenting the death of an innocent person, is what this meant for the country. And one of the things that we've been talking about offline has been they've shut down 4 or 5 historically black colleges and universities because of bomb threats. Right. And so my main that's happening today in real time. And my main sense was like, if we don't do something, if we don't as a country step back from this brink, I actually don't know what's going to happen. And I'm afraid that someone is going to come and do something. Forgive me, I'm going to tell a story. I haven't told this story on here before, but I was a junior in college, I think. It was when 9/11 happened. I was in college. And right after 9/11 happens, I walk out of the library, and a guy who I knew was across the street, and he comes like walking across the street, and the kid wasn't even, he was Indian. It was an Indian kid, and he grabs him. A white kid grabs the Indian kid and says, "I know you know what happened." Mm. And he was so mad that he didn't even know how to process it. So it took me and another friend of mine to pull this kid away. And he was just walking around in a rage because he looking for someone who he could like push that out on. Yeah. And my fear was that something like that's going to happen now, that someone's going to say, Charlie Kirk has been killed. We need to do something about it. And that's the rhetoric that I see, and not all over the internet, but in certain portions of the internet. I've seen people saying, we are at war, we need to do something about it. And if that kind of language becomes normative, then I fear for the safety and the health of the people in this country.
I was talking with Sky earlier today. It's on his podcast that will come out tomorrow, that he said that he doesn't think we're in the 60s, that maybe this is like 1914 and the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand that led to the start of World War I.
Oh my goodness.
I don't know, like Sharon, obviously not America, that was Europe, but like when I say that, how does that strike you?
How bad is it?
How bad is it? How bad is it?
Well, when you put the context of what was happening in Europe prior to World War I, you had all kinds of crazy entangling alliances. But what was behind the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand was Serbian nationalism. It was a Serbian nationalist with tuberculosis who felt as though he had nothing to lose in that moment, that this was his moment to, extricate Serbia from these crazy alliances that, like if you attack Russia, then we're going to do X. And if you are with France, then we're going to do Y. The map of Europe didn't look anything like it does today, by and large. So the situation in Europe prior to World War I was extremely complicated. You could take an entire semester class and only focus on the 6 months leading up to his assassination. Yeah. I do understand this person's larger point, though, that one shooting, which happened in a very bizarre way, like they tried to shoot him and it didn't work, and he went to get a sandwich and he happened to drive by and he seized on his moment. I do understand what he's saying, that this seems like when we look at it in hindsight, that this will have been a moment, a turning point, if you will, this will have been a moment in history, much like Franz Ferdinand's assassination was.
Justin, how much danger is our republic in?
A lot. This is a powder keg. Again, I don't think people realize how much influence he had, and you take the chance of those he was influencing becoming radicalized, the radicalization that was just happening in general all over. This is a moment that we have to watch out for, and we have to be very careful about what we say, how we talk about others, and how we try to resolve issues, because I think we're on the edge at this moment.
Yeah, I remember I was jumping on Justin's internet, and I saw you talking about how that impacted you as someone who travels around the country. Can you say a little bit about that?
Yeah, so on my Instagram, I was just kind of doing my civic update, and I happened to do it on this assassination. And I said, one of the things that hit me was, man, obviously on a much larger level, Charlie Kirk was going around to places where people disagreed with him. And that's something that I do, several times a month, is going to places where I know people have serious disagreements with me. And I remember one instance, and I didn't talk about this, but I remember one instance, I think I was at the University of North Carolina, and there was a lady in the audience, and just the way that she looked at me, I was like, she really hates, like, you don't know me, but you really hate me for this difference of opinion, which I always try to express with thoughtfulness and compassion. And you wonder sometimes, even just being the leader of the AND campaign and some of the stances that we have to take, do I not return home, right, to my son? So that hit me with this. That was
one of the things that I remember, I remember being on the internet, and I was speaking somewhere, and someone, you never read the comments, right? You never read the comments. But sometimes the comments just sneak up because you see your picture. It's like, oh, I'm going to this place. I remember someone put under the comment, and they said, Satan often describes himself or disguises himself as an angel of light. And I was like, wow, someone actually who doesn't know me thinks of me as Satan. That was such a profound sense of dislocation, because I feel like I would know if I was Satan. And so one of the things that happens is, it is true that when you speak to like people's political opinions, you're touching something that feels like that core identity, and there's a certain amount of courage. And I think the exact same thing. Do you feel like, maybe I can ask you this, Sharon, do we know what it was that like helped pull the country back from this political violence in the 1960s? Was there something that happened that kept this powder keg from pulling us apart? Is there any lessons that we can learn from that period of time in history that might be useful to us right now?
I wish there was like a magic button where I could say, well, and then the president said the following thing.
There we go.
And we were
That's
like,
what we
you
need.
know what? That's true. Like I wish we had, something that we could point to like that. The 70s, by the way, had fewer, high profile assassinations, but the 70s were also crazy. The 70s were also crazy. Like people were being taken hostage in, Iran and like the 70s themselves, like the Manson murders. Like I don't know if the 70s were actually that much calmer.
So we're saying if we survived the 60s, we ran into the 70s. We might not be looking forward to. It might be in for a rough time.
Well, so of course during the 60s we kick the decade off with the assassination of JFK. And then LBJ ascends to the presidency, and he sort of takes the reins of the civil rights movement and moves a bunch of really important legislation across the finish line. That had profound repercussions around the country. It made some people feel very angry that they might have to share public facilities, or, that they might actually have to tolerate things that they didn't want to tolerate in the past. And then, LBJ leaves office. We have the end of the 60s, and who is elected? It's Richard Nixon, right? And so Richard Nixon, while not popular and deeply corrupt, he has a different tone in he's actually not trying to stir the pot in the sense of like, let's make progressive change in the country the way LBJ was. The biggest progressive changes that Richard Nixon was making was the formation of the Environmental Protection Agency. So he was not actually trying to like say, let's right some of America's wrongs. Let's bend the arc of the universe towards justice. That was not the tone of Richard Nixon.
That was not what he was up to. Yeah.
Right. So, and I'm not saying that that Richard Nixon was in the right, because he obviously, as I said, was a deeply corrupt individual. But I do think people then had other things to focus on, like Watergate. And like what the CIA was doing. And then, of course, we have all of the incredible amount of economic unrest that happened during the end of the 1970s, where you couldn't even get gas to put in your car because of
Sharon, you've not encouraged us. I want to say that much to you.
Soon there's going to be Watergate.
There is.
That's the takeaway.
Economic collapse. So, Justin, do you think there's a particular role for the church to play in this moment? I will be honest. I have not. It's unfair for me to judge the church based upon what the algorithm has shown me about some of the responses. But I would say that sober-minded hasn't been the only thing that I've seen. What do you think would be, I'm a pastor and I'm trying to figure out what I should say or do in this moment? Do you have any advice for churches?
The first thing is you'd have to be very clear that this should not have happened. And I think before a lot of people sober up, maybe that's where they should start and end. This should not have happened. I have a lot of disagreements with the way that Charlie Kirk talked about Black people and all those things. This should not have happened. He had the right to say the things that he said. He was having open debate. I have a lot of disagreements. Any disagreement that was had with him should have been had in debate, not through this. And so sometimes we move on from that a little too quickly. That needs to be laid as a solid foundation to any conversation that we're going to have about this. It should not have happened. It's not okay. Nobody should die from that. Then we can continue on to say, what kind of conversations do we have with people who we don't agree with? And what is our objective? If our objective is somehow, go ahead.
No, I was thinking like, I want to go ahead and like take a pause there. Cause I can say there's one part of the internet that is kind of, even like the black corners of the internet says we should reject this idea of empathy. And that this isn't all black people, obviously it's a portion of it. But there is a sense in which to be socially conscious means you need to lead with the stuff that this person did wrong. At what point, when does that part of the conversation, does the analysis happen next week? Like, how do you think about the lamenting of violence while people's families are still mourning? Maybe this is true of any public figure. Mm-hmm. And when does the time come to assess their legacy? How do you make that kind of judgment in your own right and your own thinking? How do you know when it's time for me to say, here's some further reflections upon the implications of this person's life and legacy?
I think once the things settle down, I just don't think a lot of people, I can't put a time on it. So I can't say in exactly 2.5 weeks they'll be ready. But as you hear the conversations, if people have kind of sobered up, then we can say, but let's look at the impact that this has. Part of the point that I think you're getting to is, even from a lot of Christians, we're seeing people that are being discipled by secular activism. Right. Yes. And they're coming outside of that civil rights ethos, and they're really pulling on a more secular activist ethos. And we've got to get past it. And I think pastors have to understand, especially those who are just coming into the justice conversation, you've got to correct that too, as you correct some of the things that we're seeing from this Christian nationalism and very insensitive ways of talking about race and the history of that as well.
Why? I think everyone here knows, everyone listening knows, Jesus told us to love our enemies, commanded us that if someone hits you in the cheek, to turn the other cheek, preached a pretty nonviolent message. I'm just thinking right now, like, what is the role of an average Christian, someone who's not in leadership? Like, I have no influence over how my...
Can I say that? Can I say it's deeper than Jesus told people to be nonviolent? And so what I'm saying is Jesus didn't just say, be nonviolent. We talk about this a lot with the cross. Yes, the cross, and they say this for Christians. Yes, the cross was a death that brought about the forgiveness of sins. It was a sacrifice that brought about the forgiveness of sins. That was part of it. But the cross is also inescapably political, because what the Roman Empire did when you got in the way that it was an act of political violence. So Jesus's death was an act of political violence, as all the Gospels make clear that he was an innocent person who was killed by the state. But the issue here is that Jesus does not see his death as this tragedy. It is a revelation of a different way of being. If the empire sees enemies and it kills them, and the Son of God sees enemies and it loves them. So Jesus's death was not only a sacrifice for sins, it was that, but it was a critique of imperial ways of being. So it's saying that the way to change the world is not through imposing your will and killing your enemies, but by loving your enemies sacrificially. And so Jesus didn't just teach about enemy love, he embodied enemy love. And Paul, who was once persecuting Christians and killing them through the imposition of his will, after he becomes a Christian, begins to laud the importance of love and persuasion. And whatever else happened later in the history of Christianity, and Christians did a lot of stuff later, it is completely clear that the first century of Christian mission and evangelism was done non-violently and through persuasion. And it was Christians, initially mostly Jewish Christians, who evangelized the Roman Empire that had colonized them. They're actual enemies. And so you have then the entirety of Christianity is about, I will love you and serve you as the means of persuasion over against an empire that conquers and kills. And so for us to reject violence, it is not because Jesus said, don't do it, as if it's a number of things Jesus said didn't do, like don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal. It is the way of being that as a Christian that is challenged by political violence. And so when Justin says to lament the death of one's enemies is a deeply Christian activity, because it shows that you understand something about what the gospel is that we were once enemies of God who loved us anyway and reconciled us to himself. And so part of what it means to be a Christian is to leave open that possibility for others. And you can't evangelize or love someone who you kill. And so I think it's a little bit deeper than that. And so maybe you want to say, what might all of this theology mean to a practical Christian? I'll hand back the show to my guest. It means that you do the hard work of loving the people who disagree with you. And so, yes, this moment when someone that says something that we disagree with, it is now when you can actually reveal this deeply Christian idea in the way that we treat our neighbors. Justin, did I leave something out?
No,
or did I just steal?
You preached, and I think the practical implications of that are something that we're not always willing to deal with, right? Like we can hear it, we can talk about it. When it comes to this moment where your principles matter the most, that's when somehow we find exceptions to the rule.
Yeah.
Sharon,
I think that's
you
true.
were.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I was going to say, I think that's true. Yesterday, I put up a post that verbatim Esau says, loving your neighbor as yourself also includes your enemies. And let me tell you, that is a message many people did not want to hear. I got so many comments where people were like, this ain't it. He didn't love me. He didn't love me. He worked against my community. He hated people of color. He hated gay people. He, like they have a list of things that they have as critiques of their perception of Charlie Kirk, and rightly or wrongly, they feel justified in hating because they received what they perceive as hatred, if not personally directed, but perhaps directed towards their community. So they feel very justified in that stance. And I agree with you, Justin, that and I agree with you too, Esau, that the idea that we can somehow hate our enemy out of this situation is one that has never been borne out either in any religious teaching of any stripe or historically. We are never going to hate our enemy out of the situation we are in.
Maybe one of the things that I'm wondering is do you feel like there's the political will to stop deploying these deaths for the narratives to further our agendas? One of the things that I hope would happen is that every time there's a tragedy, there's this opportunity to learn. And so I think about someone comes in and like they shoot up a school, and that is a tragedy. But I also think it's an opportunity to not, it's the opportunity to ask, is this the kind of country that we want to be? And I feel like there have been moments in our history where those kinds of deaths cause us to stop and think. And I feel like over time, our politicians have gotten better at quickly redeploying these tragedies for political ends. And we don't have a statesman that I can imagine right now who has the prominence to say to the nation, we have to stop. Is there something that we can do, or is it just up to like individual small but mighty people to do that in their own community if they're not going to get that leadership from the top?
Yeah, I think one of the things we have to do is everybody's eyes are on the scoreboard. So anything that happens in the culture war, you got to look at the scoreboard and say, wait, who's going to get points for this?
Yes, that's what I was trying to say.
Yeah, who's going to get? And so we have to find a way to get people's eyes off the scoreboard and actually to see the humanity behind these things. I can't tell you how many. I mean, we saw initially there's conservatives come out and say, oh, this is all the left. They've been planning this. They're going to war with us. You have MSNBC coming out and saying, oh, he actually caused his own shooting. But this is all about the scoreboard. And people are trying to make sure we cannot let them take advantage of this. And instead of saying, what about the humanity? And if we keep looking at the scoreboard, one day we're going to turn around and there's going to be no game left. There's not going to be anything left. And I think that's the struggle. It's that we must win at all costs, and the score matters more than the actual tragedy.
I have one more question, and this might seem to be hopefully not overly cynical. I've not actually said anything publicly about his death on social media. And there's a reason behind that. I actually have friends in my life who actually listen to Charlie Kirk, and people who are close to him in my family. And I actually went to the people who I know who are most affected and said, like, I know this, I never consumed this content. And I spoke with them. And I have this feeling as I'm watching everyone comment on this, that we've all turned into our own PR firms, where we have to say, here are my reflections upon like the Charlie Kirk death, which used to be the job of corporations. And it feels very pronouncement-like. Yeah. And I know this is like a podcast, but at least it gives us a chance to have a holistic conversation. And I feel like there's something dehumanizing or something insufficient about saying every person announces to everybody what they think, but they don't actually talk to anybody individually. And I wonder, and this is just a wonder, are we actually praying for the people for whom we wish thoughts and prayers? And so for me, I've said, okay, who do I know who might actually be damaged by this? Can I have a conversation for them? Is that me being holier than thou, me taking advantage that I have a podcast? Or there's something about our desire to make a public pronouncement that is leading to the division? Because then in the comments, people will parse their friend's statement as if it was like done by a PR firm. I'm seeing like how this whole thing breaks down. Is this just me being tired of this, or is there some? Because I used to do this a lot in the past. Anytime something happened, I don't have my comments. I'm less likely to do that. Justin, for those of whose job it isn't to be the AND campaign, what kind of stuff are we required, or should we say publicly?
I mean, I think you do see a lot of virtue signaling. I think people understand that their tribe demands a certain response to certain things, and you can get that pat on the back. And if you say the wrong thing, right, you can get that cancellation. So there's a pressure to do that. There's a self-interested incentive. But I think it all goes back to what Sharon was talking about before. It's this, and she didn't say it this way, but I think she was right. It's this culture war ethic that is so far from a Christian ethic that, I think something is certainly lost.
Sharon, how do you decide? I know it's part of your job as America's government teacher, but do you feel sometimes that you're not ready to speak? How do you decide when you're going to do something publicly?
Yeah, and Justin's right. There is a tremendous amount of pressure to say something. And when you do say something about one thing, people are very quick to say, well, I didn't see you posting any videos about X. I didn't see you comment on the fact that the dog got its tail run over. So I'm going to listen to nothing you have to say. People are, looking for ways to to not actually have to reconcile any part of their own beliefs with what you might be saying. They only are looking for a reason to dismiss you. And that speaks exactly to what you're saying, Esau, with this idea of like everything is a carefully crafted PR statement vetted by a team. Like that's how it feels to, I think, to many creators, to many leaders, and also to the public at large. There is no way for a single individual to comment on everything that happens in the world. It would just be a running list of tragedy. That's all your account would be, because there is an untold amount of tragedy occurring the world over each and every day. So some of it has to do with, your own judgment. I've posted about Charlie Kirk's death a couple of times, in part because as somebody who also speaks frequently on college campuses, I have spoken twice at the college campus where Charlie Kirk was shot. And I'm scheduled to speak there again in 2 weeks. So I know the people that work at this school. They're lovely people. I find them to be very warm, kind, generous. I would never wish this on their college campus, and I would certainly never wish this on the Kirk family. So there is a personal element of this to me, in part because I have the connection of the university, but also I work in the politics space. And, as Justin does, I go to college campuses and I go to different places where I present my ideas, and people disagree with me sometimes, mostly very kindly. But, Charlie Kirk was speaking politely to somebody in the middle of when this happened as well. He wasn't in the middle of having an armed fist fight with somebody. And that's not to say that I endorse all of his ideas or I endorse what he's saying. I'm just saying, like, he was just speaking calmly with somebody as well in the middle of when this happened. So to me, there is a personal connection there. So thinking about, like, what do I speak on? I have to be guided by the idea that I need to be able to add something to this conversation. I have nothing to say about football, right? Like, I don't know anything about that. I got nothing meaningful to say about that. Whatever I say would sound uneducated and dumb. There's a litany of topics on which I'm wholly uneducated and can add nothing to the conversation. So I'm guided by this idea of, like, I don't want to just add to a cacophony of angry noise, that I want to be hopefully part of a solution and not part of furthering the problem.
Yeah, I would say this, and we'll close with this. If there's nothing else that we can do in this exact moment, it is maybe we need less people who are analyzing the situation, which is important for people to do to make your own mind up about what's happening. But it is vital in this moment that we continue to see the people who make up this country as people made in the image of God, who deserve dignity and respect, and who do not deserve violence. What happened to Charlie Kirk is a tragedy. What happened, the implications of that is an unfolding tragedy in the United States and the violence that it may or may not lead to. But also the people who have to grow up without, like I said, their father or their husband is something worth lamenting. And as long as we can continue to do that, we have some share of our humanity remaining. If there's nothing else you take from this podcast, hopefully you hear that, and hopefully we treat each other well this weekend. I'm going to be praying for this country to hold itself together, and that's not just the words for this podcast. It's my hope for what actually occurs to this weekend. If you're going to preach about this or mention this, I know we have pastors here. Do that. Turn the temperature down. And give us time to process and make our way forward as a country. Thank you all for listening to the Esau McCauley podcast. Thank you so much for coming, sharing. Thank you for Justin on short notice. Thank you for the people who have to edit this or turn this around relatively quickly. I'll see you all next week. The Esau McCauley podcast is a production of Holy Post Media, produced by Mike Stay Low, Stray Low. If you know, now you know. Edited by Seth Gorvette, like a Corvette. Music by Rob Knorr. Make sure to follow the show wherever you get your podcast and leave a review so more people can find it. See you next time. I'm out.